Hi readers, Chris here. Happy New Year. I can't believe it's 2022, but I'm here today to talk about my favorite books of December 2021 and what I'm going to be starting off the new year reading. So, as always, it's super hard to put all the books I read in order. Usually, the best one is easy, the worst is easy, and the middle ones are kind of difficult. But in the interest of time, I'm going to jump in and talk about the favorite book that I finished in December, which shouldn't be a big surprise, and that's going to be The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. I started this book back in the beginning of November. It took me a long time to read because it's almost 1,100 pages. It's a big, long book. I already did a full-length review. I talked about what I liked about it, what I didn't like, and this book already made it into my top 10 for the year. So I don't think there's really much else I can say about it other than I really liked it, even though I did have some issues with it. That's why it was not higher on my list. But for the month of December, this was probably my favorite book. Which brings me to my second favorite book of December, and that's going to be The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. Again, not a big surprise. I am a huge fan of the Poppy Wars and the Poppy Wars series. So The Burning God is the third book in the Poppy Wars. I did a 1-minute review, and I would love to go back and review the whole series if I have time. I don't know if I'm going to have time, but I would absolutely love to. I really love this series. I love the whole thing. I'm so glad it was recommended to me back in the beginning of the year. The second book in this series made my top 10 list for the year, and the only reason that this book didn't make the top 10 list is because of the ending. I am someone who is super corny, and I love my endings tied up in a neat little bow with no loose ends, and that is not what I got in this book. The ending of this book is kind of upsetting, but I understand that the book needed to end the way it did because the story is about Rin, and what happens to Rin, her journey is over at the end of this book. So even though others are going to go on and have their own adventures, Rin's journey ends. So I understand the way the book ends. I don't like it, but I do understand. So it's very bittersweet, very bittersweet. But it's still my second favorite book of December and definitely one of my favorite series of the year of 2021. My third favorite book of December is a book that was wrapped up in a neat little bow, and that's going to be Winter by Marissa Meyer. Winter is the fourth and final book in the Lunar Chronicles series, and I have to say the Lunar Chronicles is probably my favorite YA fantasy of 2021. I really love this fantasy. I love how each of the books in this series focus on a different character, a different girl, and that they're all kind of retellings of famous fairy tale characters. So in the first book, we had Cinder. She's a Cinderella type character. In the second book, we had Scarlet. She's a Little Red Riding Hood character. She was my favorite. In the third book, we had Cress. She was a Rapunzel character. And in this book, we have Winter, who's basically a Snow White type character. I really love this whole story. I love everything about the characters. I love everything about it. I can't remember if by the time I post this video, if I'll have a review or not, but if not, there will be one coming. I still think that Scarlet is my favorite character. Even though I did enjoy Winter and meeting Winter, I do think there was a slight missed opportunity with her character, but I still love this book. I still love this series, and I'll be talking more about it soon if I haven't already. Now my fourth favorite book of December, and that's going to be The Last Guardian, the final book in the Artemis Fowl series. And yes, I know that Artemis Fowl technically continues because he has brothers and they have their own series of books, etc., etc. But for the main Artemis Fowl series, this is the final book. And this is book 7 or 8. I've been reading these books all year, and I've been talking about them a lot, and even though I haven't been reviewing them individually, I've talked a lot about how the first 4-ish books in this series I really, really, really enjoyed, but then the second half of the series, I haven't liked those books as much. I haven't liked the villains, I haven't liked the convoluted plots, they just haven't been as good as the first ones. And I'm happy to say that The Last Guardian goes back to like what I loved about the original books. It's a super simple plot. All my favorite characters are there. My favorite villains are there. It is a good versus evil. It is Artemis and his criminal mastermind trying to like outthink his opponent. It's everything that I like about the Artemis Fowl series. I feel like in this final book, they finally went back to like what made this series special and what made this series great in the beginning. So even though it's not higher on my list, like it is still a middle grade, fantasy series. There were still a couple issues that I had with it, but overall, it is a solid conclusion to the series, which I really liked. So maybe, again, if I have time, I'll review the whole series, but suffice to say, it is a solid book. I really enjoyed it, and yeah. So that brings me to my 5th favorite book of December, which was a bit of a disappointment, and I don't think I've done a review for this one yet, but it will be coming soon, and that is The Bright and the Pale by Jessica Rubinkowski. Hard name to pronounce. I got this book in one of my Spearcraft book boxes, like way earlier in 2021. And I was waiting for the winter time to read it because, as you can see, it's about this like icy mountain town. Everyone has been cursed and they're frozen in time. There's this one girl who gets free. It's got all these icy, wintry vibes, so I was really looking forward to reading it in December. And I had high hopes that this would be like a fun YA fantasy tale. Unfortunately, this book really kind of fell flat. I will go into it a little bit more when I do my review, so what I will say for now is that the characters are not well developed. The plot does that thing where they like just throw a lot of information at you and kind of expect you to remember it or pick up on it, but it's really hard because there's like a lot going on. There's a bright god and a pale god. They have champions. People are being rounded up. There's a czar. There's this, icy curse that's on some people. Like, there's just a lot that's going on, and they're just like rocketing information at you, and I'm like, I don't even know why I should care about any of this, so why are you telling me this? And then our main character, she's supposed to like have anger issues, but she really doesn't. Like, they say that, but they don't show it. And there's that rule of like show, don't tell. And unfortunately, this book kind of falls into that. And then again, another thing about this book that really, really, really annoys me is that it is not a complete story. It sets up a sequel, which is, I have no problems with books setting up sequels, but you're a new author, this is your first book, you should make a story that is so great that people want to keep reading. When you write a book like this that just kind of ends with no conclusion, with no complete arc, without questions answered, it's almost like you're forcing people like, hey, if you want to find out what happens, you have to get the next one. And I don't know about you, but I don't like being told what I have to or have to do. I should be able to decide for myself. So it really annoys me when books do that. So if you are an author or aspiring author, don't do that. I will say, if it's like in the middle of a series, it's okay. I'm already 2 or 3 books in. I'm already invested. But book number 1, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Anyway, I know, Rosie Cockshut, if you're watching this, I know you've said this in one of your videos before. Totally agree. It's a big pet peeve of mine. So that is why this book is one of the reasons why this book is so far down on my list for December. And finally, that brings me to my least favorite book of December, which I'm sad to say is The Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. I literally just finished reading this book yesterday, January 1st. So technically, I finished it in January, but hey, it's my channel, my rules. I'm counting it as a December book. And to be fair, with the amount of books that Stephen King writes, you're bound to have a stinker once in a while. If you saw my top 10 of the year, there were two, not one, but two Stephen King books on my top 10 for the year. If I end up doing a, top 10 worst books of the year, this one will probably be on it, Skeleton Crew. It's a series of short stories, and the short stories in here are just, I didn't really like any of them. There's one short story in here that I really liked, the one about the monkey. That was creepy, gave me chills, and was super creepy. All the other stories in here were either started off creepy and then fell flat, or they just felt pointless to me. They felt pointless. They weren't particularly good. They weren't particularly scary or creepy or any of the things that I like Stephen King for. I like Stephen King for his character development, the way he does tension, and I guess it's just hard to do that in short stories. But I've read other short story collections of his, like Night Shift, and that one had a lot of good ones in it. So I don't know what it was about Skeleton Crew, but like I said, for 90% of the stories in here, I didn't really care for, and there's really not that many good things I can say about it. So that is why Skeleton Crew is at the bottom of my list for December. So that brings me to my January TBR, January 2021. I am kicking off the year with another reader recommendation, and that is going to be Cirque du Freak, A Living Nightmare. This was recommended to me by Mason in the Dark. So Mason, if you're watching, thank you so much for recommending this book to me. I am starting off my year with this recommendation. Can't wait to see how this one goes. Next up, I'm continuing my Stephen King journey with the next book on my list, The Drawing of Three. If any of you were around here last year, I started off reading The Gunslinger in January 2021, which was the first book of the Dark Tower series. The Drawing of Three is the second book in the Dark Tower series, so it's fitting that I started last year with a Dark Tower book, and I am starting this year with a Dark Tower book. I have read this one before, but it was such a long time ago, I really don't remember that much about it. So we'll see. I remember enjoying it, so we'll see if my opinion has changed or not. Next up, I have my adult fantasy for the month of January, and yes, I am taking the plunge, I am jumping on the hype train, and I am finally reading a book by Sarah J. Maas. I have never read a book by Sarah J. Maas. In fact, I had never really heard of Sarah J. Maas until I joined Bookstagram in 2020. So I know she's written a bunch of super popular series. I haven't read them, but I decided I was going to jump in with House of Earth and Blood, Crescent City, because the sequel to this comes out in February. So I figured I would jump in, give this one a shot, see if it lives up to all the hype. So I will let you know. It's bigger than I thought it was going to be, but hopefully I can finish it by the end of January, or at least in time for the new book to come out in February. Next up, I have my historical fiction for the month, and that's going to be The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I read my first Kristen Hanna book last year, which was The Nightingale, which I absolutely loved, so I've been wanting to read another one of her books, and I decided that The Great Alone, which is about a family moving to Alaska, it seemed like January was a good month to read this in, a wintry month, so hopefully this lives up to how good The Nightingale was. We'll see what happens. I haven't heard too many reviews about it other than people that like Kristen Hanna seem to like this one, so hopefully it lives up to my expectations. Next up, to offset all the big books that I'm reading, I have my YA fantasy for the month, and that's going to be The Cruel Crown. So this is a series of novellas, I believe. I started reading the Red Queen series last year, 2021. So I've read the first two. I've read Red Queen and the second one, whose name is Glass Sword. And I knew that there were these novellas, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to read the third book or read these novellas first. And it was actually Mary and Joe at Book Buds who recommended that now would be a good time to read Cruel Crown. So that is what I'm going to do. I have a lot of big books, so hopefully this will help offset my reading. So Mary and Joe, thank you for encouraging me to read this one, and we'll see how it goes. Last up, I have my middle grade book for January. Now that I finished Artemis Fowl and all those books, I needed a new middle grade fantasy series to read in 2022, and I decided that I'm finally going to read Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I've been wanting to read this series for a long time. I know a lot of people love them. I've seen the movies, which I thought were pretty cute, but of course I always hear that the books are better, so I'm finally jumping in with The Lightning Thief, and I'm going to continue to read the series throughout 2022. That's going to be my new Artemis Fowl book. That is it for my reading wrap-up, my December wrap-up, and my January TBR. My little old lady Snowball and I are gonna go find some things to party with here and get our New Year's off on the right foot. Right, Snowball? Are we gonna party? Yeah? Oh, thank you for your little kisses. All right, everyone. Happy reading.